I've got a gavel.
Oh, yeah.
Knock, knock, knock. 3 years in solitary.
And no coffee.
Please make sure you've all signed the sheet, the present sheet. Please make sure. What I want to talk to you before we go on with the subject, it's spring. What happens in the future? Mrs. Barone isn't here to ask us what comes next or how long this course goes. You see, when we finish this, we're doing a little bit of natural theology now. In this, I've put these proofs on paper solidly as much as I could so they'll be useful to you. To my mind, perhaps the prime question today is an Deus sit, whether God is. Atheism is becoming official around the world, and the attacks on the church and the churches on religion are all presupposing there's no God. And to my mind, the people that have caused that are Christian peoples themselves. Oh, I believe in God. I get people, as I mentioned before, about the 2 men from Montreal. You're a philosopher. I always wanted to ask a philosopher, do you believe in God? And I said, no. And the young woman, who was a very good friend, who took me there, said, look, tell me, what are you saying? I don't believe it. I know he exists with utter certitude and can defend it. All they could resort to then was not what is the proofs, nothing, not interested in it. But how can you believe in a God when a little child is born crippled? I said, that's another question. You're confusing 2 questions. Is there a God? And is God a good God? You're confusing 2 questions. And why does evil exist? It's a 3rd question you're confusing. So, but everywhere this attack upon the existence of God disturbs me very greatly. And I'm trying to defend everywhere I can. And the question I ask, maybe we should be recording some of this, do you think? I think about it.
I'm ready. Very good.
So, when somebody attacks the existence of God, I always challenge them on this. What are you attacking? The proper proof, the proper principle, the common principle, or the fact, or the nexus? What the hell are you talking about? I think I've mentioned before, I said to one man, he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, no, my friend, you don't know what you're talking about. That's your biggest problem. And, they've got to remember that. So, that's why I've elaborated the proofs here, different ways, and particularly the 3rd way, which is the professional philosopher's, that's his main domain, you might say. All the others are applications of the 3rd way. They're beautiful proofs. Now, the first 3 ways prove the necessity of his existence. The 4th way deals with the perfections. Remember, we said there are about 5 basic weaknesses in the world around us. Things have to be moved, things have to be caused, and things are contingent. They don't necessarily exist. The 4th way depends upon grades of perfection. And the 5th way upon finality. I'll leave you to read the 3rd way, proof from contingent being, on page 100. Remember, these, say, technical ways, they're all based upon Woodbury's work, an adaptation of his work, a rewriting of his work. Now, the 4th way is more difficult, to quote Father Woodbury. In fact, somebody stood in for him one night, Father Radford, who was given the title in Europe of Doctor Australis. Wilf Radford was a very good friend of mine, one of the most likeable persons I've ever known. Some people called him a simpleton because he was so gentle and yet powerful and manly in his teaching. But he was a reasonable man. They called him Doctor Australis in Rome, the Australian doctor. Some even said he was more brilliant than Woodbury, but I don't know that that is true. But as they've all said, when Radford lectured on this one night, Father Woodbury asked me, I was driving him somewhere from the farm where we'd been out to look at the cattle, and he said, do you think that was presented the right way, the fourth way? Because it's a little bit more difficult than the others. Forgive me if I'm having trouble speaking tonight. I had a dentist today do something. So the first three ways shows the necessity of God's existence, or that he bees necessarily. The fourth and fifth way shows his perfection. So the fourth way particularly is based upon perfections. There are degrees of perfection in the world. I've always remembered the amethyst rock on my coffee table. I love it, it's beautiful. I remember the little mushroom climbing down the waterfalls, Minnamurra waterfall, with an uncle. We came across a little reddish, yellowish mixture of colours mushroom, only about that high. I was fascinated by botany in those days, particularly. I was studying botany, and I found this mushroom. I thought, what a beautiful sight that is. I'm sorry I never photographed it. Then another occasion I saw a dog. Now, I'm not a dog lover. No, dogs are dogs, that's my attitude. But no, don't go out of my way to prefer dogs over babies or anything like that. But I saw this dog in the park, and people were stopping looking at it. One of the most elegant animals I've ever seen. Tall, long leg, smooth hair, beautiful it was. Then I saw a black woman right outside the White House. Yes, it was white at the time. And so I saw this black woman walk past. Somebody said, look at that woman. She walked with a majestic walk. The only way I could describe it, a regal walk. Then I saw the Mona Lisa on another occasion. All these are grades of beauty. The Mona Lisa doesn't have the beauty of the mushroom. She got much more mushroom, pardon me, she got more beauty than the mushroom, but there are degrees of beauty. Now there are two things come out of that. One is there's beauty and there's limitation. They're more and less. So no matter how much beauty this little curly-head, freckle-nosed little girl is that everybody loves, no matter how beautiful she is, there's still somebody else. So everybody has some beauty, but different beauty. Patricia, you don't possess all the beauty. She's got some. You don't possess all of it. Sister's got some. Everybody has some beauty. That'll cost you $50 each. So the beauty is limited. You've got some. But no matter how much you get to know somebody and what beauty you see in them, still somebody else with some beauty too. And it's always more or less. So here we have a principle of beauty and a principle of limitation. Here's the principle. Diverse things are not from themselves united, but if they're found to be united, then there's some one cause of their unity. It applies to truth, it applies to goodness. Those properties of being which are not from themselves limited. Somebody can have beauty, there's being. The example I like to use is this. Look, that's a being. I did this in honor of one occasion. I said to a girl down the front, look, that's a being. I said, look, here comes another one. And she ducked. So they've got degrees of truth, degrees of beauty, degrees of being, degrees of goodness, degrees of unity. Yours and my body and soul are united, but God's got greater unity. So it takes something which can give them the unity. Diverse things are not from themselves united, but if they're found united, then there's some one cause of their unity. The principle of limitation. So, that is, each has two principles within its nature. And it takes something to unite the two of them. We call that the henological principle. Hen in Greek is one. The uniting principle, the oneifying principle, the principle that unifies them. But that henological principle is a mode of causality. It's a mode of causality. All the principles are that we're dealing with here. They're all modes of causality. Then a corollary, something which follows from causality, is the principle of limited regress. In a series of essentially subordinated causes, there's no regress to infinity. That follows from causality. If you can see that, try and think about it, reflect over these. Professor John Doyle, who was a classmate of mine at Montreal. John and I, he was a professor in the Loyola College there, but he's trying to complete his doctorate at the University of Montreal. We were in the same class. When the spring came and I thought, oh, I've got to be hitting the books, the exams are coming up, he'd say, to hell with the books. Jump in the car. I didn't have a car then, of course, as a student. We jumped in the car, we went up into Mount Royal. Gorgeous territory up there. And we'd walk and talk and just reflect over the matter. Sometimes you've got to do that. Toss the books aside and think and just reflect about it. So this principle of causality, the henological principle, followed by the principle of limited regress. We have already seen the fact, namely that perfection and limitation of perfection, two principles, must be there to unite them. And the fact may apply to truth, being. This is more true. Being cannot be and not be under the same respect. That's more true than this. Whatever is received in the manner of the recipient. Or this, movement towards an image, as it is an image, is movement towards that of which it is the image. We saw that before. So, all of these things have beauty. But it argues back to one that is beauty, is beautiful. And the great Plato saw that. I think I gave you, didn't I, Plato's statement? Yes, out of the banquet, or the symposium as it's called too. I gave you the page, where he argued from contingent beautiful things up to that which doesn't have beauty but is pure beauty. And to contemplate that, isn't that an ignoble life? Which brings me to a side issue. Well, more or less. I spoke to Mrs. Kennedy in Australia on one occasion. Her daughter, who was my student and a family friend, said, try and talk to my mother about, we'll talk about the beatific vision, that vision of the ultimate beautiful. And she was saying, we Danish people, we have an idea of heaven as a great feast. I said, you'd get fed up with that. She couldn't get the idea. She couldn't get the idea of contemplation of something which is so infinitely beautiful that you'd never cease marveling at it. And I love that Greek word, agape, mouth agape. In other words, we're seized by that. And for eternity. And as Socrates said, would that be an ignoble life? Not in your life. So, that infinitely beautiful, infinitely true, infinitely good. God, what a terrible thing it is to risk the loss of that. That beatific vision, that vision that gives us happiness. Our conclusion, therefore, is this. There is some one cause of all the perfections contained within the limited, contingent things around us. That's on page 101. That is, there is a supreme cause of the limited, beautiful things around us, and this cause is itself uncaused to have beauty, or rather it is beauty, as Plato well observed in the Symposium. That is, the ultimate cause has beauty within its essence, and therefore has no limitation, for otherwise it would itself need to be caused. Note that the works of Plato were all written in about half his life, written in dialogue form. They're conversations with men around the street. I was in Athens and I looked down at this area where Plato walked and I thought, oh man, I wish I could turn it back a couple of 2,500 years. Wish I could turn the clock back just to see the boys walking around there. Glaucon and Socrates and Plato. What an experience, Father. Wouldn't that be great? The only other time I felt overawed was in Spain, where Avicenna walked up and down in this, and I walked up and down. I just looked around to see if Avicenna was there. He had a great mind. So those Arabs had splendid minds. Oh yes, I know they went wrong on lots of principles. But the third way here is from Avicenna, who actually wasn't Arabic, although he had an Arabic name, Ibn Sinha. He was really Persian, but worked in the Arabic community. So, remember, here's another principle involved there. Beauty plus limitation of beauty. Listen to this principle. The same cannot be the reason of opposites. Beauty and limitation of the beauty are opposites. There are different four modes of opposites, so we won't go into that just for a moment, but they're called opposites. They're placed in front of each other. That's what the word opposite means. Placed in front of each other. So beauty and the limitation of beauty are not from themselves united. They're opposites. So if they come together, then it has to be someone that brings them together. There's no regress to infinity. I think we've dealt with that reasonably well. This uncaused, unlimited beautiful, unlimited good, and every other unlimited perfection subsistently existing is commonly known as God. You can call it what you like. Call it the great beautiful. This is what Plato did. Call it the one. Call it the true. Call it the good. I can still see my professor Vianney Decari, le grand bien, the big good, the great good that Plato saw. Socrates didn't write anything, but what he wrote, all these conversations with Socrates, between Socrates and other young men around the street. Wish we had a few young men who'd walk around the street discussing philosophy like that today. That'd be great, wouldn't it? But you don't find that today.
You have to put it on the right pods.
But
You have to put it on the right pods.
on the right pods, yeah. I did remember in Canberra, the capital of Australia, 5 young men. A friend of mine was a traveller for a medical company. Notwithstanding the fact he wasn't supposed to do it, he said to me, why don't you take a few days off? At the time I was working very hard and he knew I needed that little break. And I went with him on his rounds, down through the southeast of Australia, in through the mountains there and back up the coast and up the coast. It was a wonderful trip, beautiful. But we stopped one evening in a cafe and about 5 or 6 young men were talking. And Len and I were just listening to them. And so finally something came up. We all burst into laughter. And one of them turned to us and said, what do you think? Well, I told him what I thought. All ears now. To make a long story short, there we were for about 3/4 to an hour, I think. And the owner closed the door, and he was pleased as punch. He said, and I think he was Greek too, by the way, if I remember correctly. And he closed the doors, and next thing, he's, will you have coffee? Will you treating us all to coffee, you know? He thought this was great. He'd like to have kept this going. I think he sort of had in mind I might stay there. But it was a lot of fun with these young men. So that's how Socrates carried on his dialogues. And there are different ways we can argue. And again, I'm going to break into logic for a second or two. When we're arguing, reasoning, we call that demonstration. That's the proper mode of arguing. Like arguing as we stood it tonight, you know, over here. Every man is mortal, Socrates is a man, and Socrates is mortal. That's called demonstration. Now, preparation for that is dialectic. You could say it this way. Gee, I wonder if man is mortal or is he not mortal? If he's mortal, is he human or is he not human? If he's human, is he this? That's called the dialectic. Picking through, that's what the Latin words means. Picking through. The word intellect means picking within. Intus legere. So this is picking through. For instance, Aristotle used it this way. He said, either there are many principles in bodily things, or maybe, yes, I can put that up here. What makes a thing many or one? How many principles are in bodies? Body and soul we're talking about. Many or one? One's not sufficient to explain all the diversity of things. So there must be many. If there are many, is it infinite? Or is it less infinite? Less than infinite? If it's less, is it two or more? That's called the dialectic. That is, in a way, a preparation for proving things. That's a preparation in any scientific venture, if you like. So he finally ends up by proving only two are necessary. Matter and form. Body and soul in living things. So he proves that's the dialectic. That's a preparation for demonstration. Then there's rhetoric. And finally, there's poetic or literary argumentation. Now, rhetoric is also called political, particularly in French. Political argumentation. Demonstration proves something definitely. Dialectic is a preparation for it. Rhetoric is using persuasive methods. This is really persuasion. That's why it's called political, particularly in the French language. Then poetic or literary, using nice words to convey something. This is an appeal to the intellect. This is an appeal to the intellect. Rhetoric is an appeal to the will, and poetic is an appeal to the imagination. Demonstration produces certitude. Dialectic produces opinion. I think I've got this all set up on my computer for you. I'll send it to you if I know I set it up, but whether it's on the computer or not, I'll try and get it out to you. Rhetoric is persuasive. You're arguing in the government or in the political arena, something like that. You're persuading. Literary or poetic, you're appealing to the imagination. He smashed him to the ground. Well, there's a poetic. He didn't just punch him on the nose, he smashed him and that sort of thing, you see. There's a famous example that Vincent Edward Smith uses. I can't remember what it is, but somebody wrote a poem, maybe Byron or somebody like that, wrote a beautiful poem, but it just didn't catch on. He changed one word. It changed the beauty of the whole thing. Just one word can do that. So the difference is demonstration produces certitude. Dialectic will produce opinion. It's less certain. Rhetoric is persuasive and appeals to the imagination. To the will. And poetic is less persuasive and just appeals to the imagination. So demonstration produces certitude. Dialectic is only a preparation for demonstration. Like here, is it many or one? Infinite or less? And that's how Plato proceeded with his dialogues. What is love? Is it this or is it that? And he'd question young people, all the time questioning. And one head of a department at the University of New England in Australia said to me, what do you think Plato was doing? Was he trying to teach us a philosophy or teach us a method? Well, apparently, it was unknown to me at the time, there are two lots of people. One saying he's only showing us a method, the other saying, oh, he's teaching us a philosophy. I was rather surprised he didn't mention that the rhetorical value and the dialectical value. And today most philosophers seem to me all they do is dialectic, like we were talking before. A certain gentleman that I know teaching philosophy taught there are three subjects. This is what he's teaching ethics. This is whole ethics like this. Abortion, euthanasia, capital punishment. Oh, if I could have taught like that, my life would have been so easy. But I wouldn't do that. My conscience wouldn't let me. So he did 2 essays for abortion, 2 essays against. 2 for euthanasia, 2 against. 2 for capital punishment, 2 against. And I was talking to his students. I said, where does he stand on these things? Well, gee, I don't know. He never told us that. I've heard that again and again about philosophers. I was, frankly, I think, hated on the campus because they knew where I stood. And my colleague, Dr. Bonnet, they knew where we both stood on abortion and euthanasia. We went for the rational order. And of course, I'm known as Mr. Capital Punisher. I've published, I think 6 papers defending capital punishment. So you can imagine where I stood.
They wanted to kill you.
Yes, that's what somebody's supposed to have said one day. I think all those people who are for capital punishment, they should be executed. That's what I think this is. Or should be shot, something like that. So, this fourth way, note the principles, my friends. If you're going to remember anything about these, the principles. When I started studying philosophy, I think it was 1901, something like that. Well, it seems that far back. I remember Father Woodbury saying he's seen books of philosophy and not one principle mentioned in it. Or if they bring up a principle, today they talk about the principle of privacy, whatever that is. The principle of, what is it, freedom of opinion or some other darn thing. It's always the principle of something, they say. I have a book, which I think is long, as far as I know, out of print. Wellner, W-U-E-L-L-N-E-R. It's about that thick. It's just all principles. So look at Woodbury on page 102. A technical statement of the fourth way. If there exist things enjoying higher and lower degrees of some transcendental perfection, such as goodness, God is. Remember the transcendentals? Every being is something, one, true, good, and because they're true and good, they're beautiful. So he's got 2 different ways of expressing it here. But big B down the bottom. But there do exist things enjoying higher and lower degrees of goodness. Therefore God exists. And all that goes before that is the principle, the henological principle. Diverse things are not from themselves united, but if they're found united, then there's some one cause of their union. And the second principle is there's no regress to infinity. I think it's fairly clear, isn't it? Barely.
Barely.
Think about it, sister. You've got to think about these things, reflect over them, and reflect means bend back. So don't go try bending back this way, but bend your mind back over them. Now the fifth way, on page 103. I'm going to put this on the board. The fifth way is based on finality. Again, we've got causality. The example that one uses is, and the best example to my mind too, here's a target, couldn't think of the word. Here's a target, nothing to do with the store. Here's an arrow heading towards the target. Now the arrow can send itself towards the target because it would mean it's able to understand the difference between being potentially there and being actually there. It would have to send itself. Well, since this is in the future, be at the target, it would have to have intellect to know the future because it's not there yet. It would have to know that what it wants is to be at the target. So it takes intellect to send it there. Yes, I know What if a wind descended there? Yes, that can happen. The arrow could... But is that intentional? Hardly. That's an accident. All right, it takes the archer, intellect. But that intellect cannot send itself to understand this arrow be at the target. It needs to move from potency to act 2. It might need another intellect. Then it might need another intellect. Because nothing can think before it thinks. If it sent itself from can think to does think, that means it thinks before it thinks. Aristotle saw this. Aristotle saw that it takes intellect, finality, in other words, be at the end. In Latin, the word for end is finis. Be at the end. So the intellect sends the arrow to the end, and that intellect requires another intellect to send it towards its end. From can think to does think. That requires another one. Unless there's, how many between them? Goodness only knows. Unless there's one that is pure, no, not pure intellect, pure intellection. It doesn't, intellect is a potency. Pure intellection. That's what Aristotle defined God as, a pure act of intellection. His words are, God is, and this is Woodbury's, understand, the understand of an understand. Of and understand. Ross calls it a thinking on a thinking. Not a thinker, that's potency. It's a pure act of thinking. It's in act to all manners of thinking. It's a pure act of understand. Its object is the understand. It's the understand is an understand with this object. It's an understand. It's wrong to consider the two as one as subject and one as object. There's no distinction in God.
Another way that I've heard it put is, God is a thought thinking itself.
Good way of expressing it, isn't it? Yeah. God is a thought thinking of itself. He's thinking about his own thinking. That's what Aristotle said. The only thing that Aristotle said is worthy of his thought, himself. That's why the Greeks thought they didn't know whether a saviour was going to be concerned about us. It's too busy thinking about itself. That was the Greek position. Does that God think about us? No, he's too busy thinking about himself. In the 12th book, chapter 9 of Metaphysics, Aristotle says God is the understand of an understand. Ross puts it this way, the translator of Aristotle. It's an act of thinking. But an act of thinking about its own thinking. He's the act of thinking about his own thinking. The Hebrews knew there was a saviour coming. There was somebody coming who was showing that God was interested in us. But the Greeks knew God existed, but they couldn't see that he'd be interested in us. So there were two currents of thought. I remember Father Geiger speaking on this beautifully. So it all surrounds this, that all finality requires intellect. And I think I put St. Thomas's words in here, didn't I? Yes, I did. Finality depends on an act of understanding. I've expressed that different ways here. But there cannot be an infinite series of essentially subordinated intellects, each being ordered to actualize another intellect, each being an ordered orderer. Principle of limited regress. By the way, don't overlook what I gave you. I gave you one page with all 5 ways summarized. That's back on page, what is it? 106. Is that where it is?
Yeah. 106 and 107.
I thought I put that in earlier. 106. No, that's not what it. That's not it.
Yeah.
Back. No, it's after the. It's way back. They're just skeleton demonstrations. Back somewhere I gave it to you. how I showed you like this. Tree plus movement. I'm sorry. It should have been stone, shouldn't it? Yeah. Stone plus movement. Cause, then there's an ultimate mover, unmoved mover. Tree plus gash. Ultimate cause. What comes between us? Well, it could be a large number of movers. There may not be. Ultimately, God alone can move the will. But he can use lower agents to do something, as St. Thomas says. He can use lower agents to sort of approach more proximately to what's needed to be done, the movement. So notice that with the archer. It always requires intellect, finality. Why? Because the end doesn't exist yet. It's got to understand the notion of an end. When look at yourself, if you go to Paris, the first thing you do is you conceive being in Paris here. It doesn't exist yet. You've got to be there. You've got to send yourself there.
Doctor, I think page looking for is 93.
But
Page 93.
93 is it? Thank you. Yes, that's it. The first way, the unmoved mover moves the hand, or the agent that's carrying out the work, to use this to move the stick and put the stone and move them together. Because diverse things are not from themselves united. But if they're found in union, there's some one cause of their union. Look, all the courts operate on this. They operate on that, supposing that principle. You know, what's his name? Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes.
Sure.
He looks for two things and he tries to put them to some cause, putting them together. Dead man, man's not by his very nature dead, puts them together somehow.
Japanese gardens work on that principle.
Do they? Good. How's that? Can you elaborate?
That something has to arrange the beauty of it.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, yes.
Where they've got all the elements of nature, but not beautiful by itself. They have to go through a series of rituals of grading the sand and placing the rocks.
Oh, yes.
And placing the trees to achieve a certain pattern of beauty.
Yes.
So it illustrates what you're talking about.
That's right. Thank you. Yes, I was in a Japanese garden in Australia with my brothers, as a matter of fact, on one occasion. I could see there was something lacking. They hadn't finished the gardens yet. But you could see all the elements being prepared, and he told me they finally put the thing, unified it all in one beautiful pattern. Thank you very much, Professor. So the second way there is the hand and the axe with a gash. It's a causation again. The tree and the gash cannot put themselves together. It needs something to put them together. Diverse things are not from themselves united. A third way, which we've just done tonight, the tree plus B have to be put together. Because the tree can be found without the B. Grind it up, burn it, no longer a tree. The fourth way, the beautiful. Causes, I put cause, produces cause here, because we can presuppose at least that there's the cause of something bringing the B together, but we must arrive at something which is unlimitedly beautiful, unlimitedly being, etc. Now put the principles under each one. I did this to try and simplify it for you. Then an unordered orderer causes the intellect and intellection, aiming at an end. I hope I haven't confused you by putting so much on each one there, but that one page brings it together. And you've got to contemplate that. But finality is a beautiful one. Remember, the fourth way and the fifth way show the necessity of God's perfection. The first three ways show the necessity of his existence. On page 104, I've developed in a slightly different way the necessity of finality. Then St. Thomas shows the necessity of finality. I took a passage there, and the disputed questions on the power of God. Beautiful word. Indeed, every agent acts for the sake of an end, for each thing desires that which is good. Now, in order that it be adapted to an end, the action of an agent must be disposed and made proportionate to it. And this cannot be accomplished without the help of some intellect, which knows the end and the intelligible reason of the end, and also the due relation of the end and that which is for the sake of the end. Otherwise, the proportion of the action to the end, agreement between means and end, I've added, would be a matter of chance. Yes, it can happen as a matter of chance, but how often would that happen? How often would an arrow, say, go towards the target by chance? Not unless he's a lousy archer. I mean, wind wouldn't blow it there. Somebody has to know that that is in proportion to be at that end, the means taken. So I've given a little explanation there. Then the final one, technical, if the action of things is ordered towards an end, God is. But the action of things is ordered towards an end, therefore God is. And the wording there, again, notice you could bracket things. You could bracket some of those, and it'd be a healthy exercise to do that. When you do things like that for yourself, you'll really understand it. Now, I've given you here the 5 ways by St. Thomas. I've retranslated from the Latin in order to avoid the mess caused by the English Dominican fathers who translated it, and it's notoriously defective. There's a copy of the first part of the Summa there. So those 5 ways, you can read that through, but you've got to remember this. It was made for beginners. The 5 ways, as St. Thomas put them here. Many philosophers have taken these 5 ways just as they are there and held them up to ridicule and shown by their stupidity they didn't understand them. Like the principle of double effect. I was talking to a professor in Australia and he said, St. Thomas overlooked the possibility of an accident. Good ghost, said the man has no idea what the principle of double effect means. Accidents don't enter the topic. However, St. Thomas knew that in the Middle Ages, these proofs are so well understood, he only had to put some elements out. All the elements are there, as you'll see, but he only had to put the bare elements in about the 5 ways, and they would be well understood in his day. So, I'm not sure whether we should go too much further tonight, because we want to digest this, but I want you to look at the objection on page 107. In these proofs, St. Thomas only gave a couple of objections to the existence of God, and all the silly objections men raise come from those 2. I went, not last summer, was it the summer before? I've forgotten now. Yes, it had to be because my brother was here last summer. Summer before, fall or something like that. I went to the Centre of Inquiry in Buffalo, which is the headquarters of the secular humanists. And there was a debate. I did mention this before, didn't I? Yes, there was a debate. But the debate was all around 3 things. One is, science explains everything today. Oh, by golly, I'd like to see the scientists that would like to defend that. They don't even understand the atom. They've got an incomplete understanding of the atom. Take the molecule, water, H2O. That doesn't explain the molecule of water. That's merely a mathematical conceptualization of that molecule. And H for hydrogen. Still trying to discover what hydrogen is down in the nucleus of the atom. It's like what we found recently with the DNA. Now we know what a human being is. Now we really know, we'll know the origin of human beings. Sawdust. So, they argued about science. Then the next argument came up, was about evil. Now that was the first one they brought up, I'm sorry. evil. If there are two contraries be infinite, the other would be totally destroyed. But according to the name God is understood that he is infinite goodness. Therefore, if God existed, no evil would be found to exist. However, there is evil in the world, therefore God does not beat. So Thomas measures up to that, and he answers it there. That which can be produced through less principles does not become through many. But it seems, oh wait there, I've jumped, I'm sorry, reply, yes. It must be said that, as Augustine says, since God is the highest good, in no manner would he allow evil to exist in his works, unless his omnipotence and goodness were such as to bring good out of evil. So, evil exists. That was the big argument they used there. Evil exists, therefore there's no God. Well, I told you about the gentleman from Montreal. I had to face that on one occasion. Then the second objection is, science can explain everything today. Oh boy, what a wild statement that is. And since science can explain everything, and that's what Moscow broadcast some years ago, I mentioned that last class, therefore we don't need a God to explain things. If that was reduced to reasoning, as we do in logic, it wouldn't stand on one foot, let alone two legs. It's just plain childish logic. Well, that was the second argument they talked about. Then the third, notice St. Thomas has dealt with them. It takes some elaboration, no doubt. But the third point they raised was miracles. They thought that all our belief in God was based upon miracles. That's really what the whole debate amounted to. Funny, I found the letter I submitted to the Western New York Catholic after this meeting. Admittedly, it was some weeks after, quite a few weeks after. They just ignored it. But the third argument, why don't miracles happen today? Why don't donkeys talk? Why don't snakes talk? I thought that was rather childish. The whole debate was rather childish. But the positive replies to the objections were never given. Secondly, none of the proofs were ever faced. Now we've got to look next class at what is the result of these. And I'm going to bring out some of the things that St. Thomas has talked about, the very nature of God, the perfections of God. Is he one, true, good, etc.? We'll bring that up.